The silent barrier. You don't lack intelligence. You don't lack options. You are stuck because your mind is trying to protect you, and it is doing the opposite. Picture the moment. You are staring at a screen or a menu or a contract. The logical path should be clear, but your body does not move. A strange weight settles in your chest. The clock continues to tick while you remain frozen in a state of suspended animation. This sensation is not laziness. It is not a character flaw. This is the silent barrier of decision paralysis. Your brain has mistaken a simple choice for a survival threat. Instead of acting, your mind begins to spiral. It scans for every possible negative outcome. It whispers questions that paralyze your will. You ask yourself, what if I choose wrong? You ask, what if I regret this later? You worry that by picking one door, you are permanently locking all the others. This overthinking feels like work. It feels like you are being responsible and thorough. But in reality, this analysis is a cage. While you analyze every angle, opportunity quietly slips away. The perfectionism that you think is keeping you safe is actually stealing your confidence. Every minute spent in indecision chips away at your trust in yourself until even the smallest choices feel like heavy burdens. You are waiting for certainty before you act. But the truth is that clarity does not come before the choice. It comes after. We are going to dismantle this fear. We are going to stop treating choices like life sentences and start treating them like experiments. You can break the loop by understanding that action is the only cure for fear. The wrong decision can teach you something. No decision teaches you nothing. Stuck without knowing why, you don't lack intelligence. You don't lack options. You are stuck because your mind is trying to protect you, and it is doing the opposite. We often imagine that being stuck is a physical sensation. We think of it like being trapped in mud or held back by walls. But decision paralysis is far more subtle and far more dangerous because it happens entirely within the quiet spaces of your own mind. It creates a sensation that feels like a pause, but is actually a high-speed collision of conflicting fears. Imagine you are sitting at your desk or standing in your kitchen. There is a choice in front of you. It might be significant, like choosing a career path or ending a relationship. Or it might be incredibly small, like deciding what to eat for dinner or how to phrase a simple email. The logic center of your brain knows that you just need to pick one path and move forward, but you do not move. You freeze. This freeze is not laziness. It is important to make that distinction immediately. Laziness suggests a lack of care or a desire to do nothing. But you care deeply. In fact, you care too much. You are not avoiding the work. You are exhausted by the mental labor of calculating outcomes. You are running 1,000 simulations a minute, trying to predict the future, trying to ensure that you do not make a mistake. You are working harder in your stillness than most people do in motion. This is the state of decision paralysis. It is a psychological trap where the fear of making the wrong choice outweighs the desire to make any choice at all. It is a silent barrier that separates your intentions from your actions. To understand why this happens, we have to look at how the brain processes risk. Your mind is an ancient survival machine. For most of human history, choices were binary and immediate. Run or fight, eat or starve, safe or dangerous. The consequences were life or death. Today, the stakes are rarely survival, but your brain still reacts with that same intensity. When you are faced with a complex decision, your brain treats the possibility of failure as a threat to your safety. The root of this paralysis is almost always fear. Specifically, it is the fear of regret. We are terrified of the idea that we might close a door that we should have walked through. We look at two options and we do not just see choice A and choice B. We see the potential for a future where we look back and say, I made a mistake. This fear of future regret locks us in the present. We believe that if we just think about it a little longer, if we just gather a little more information, the perfect path will reveal itself. But this is a lie your anxiety tells you. Perfectionism is the architect of this prison. We tend to view perfectionism as a virtue, a sign of high standards. In reality, perfectionism in decision-making is a refusal to accept reality. Reality is messy. Reality is uncertain. There are very few choices in life that are 100% clear with zero downsides. By waiting for the perfect option, you are waiting for something that does not exist. You are looking for a guarantee in a world that only offers probabilities. There are hidden triggers that make this worse. Past failures often haunt the present moment. If you made a decision 5 years ago that led to pain or embarrassment, your brain has stored that data. It has flagged the act of deciding as dangerous. It whispers to you that it is safer to stand still than to risk feeling that pain again. High expectations also play a role. We live in a culture that celebrates optimization. We are told to optimize our health, our finances, our time, and our happiness. This creates a crushing pressure to get everything right. We feel that we cannot just choose a vacation. It has to be the best vacation. We cannot just pick a job. It has to be the perfect career move. When every choice feels like a test of your competence, it is natural to be afraid of failing the exam. This is compounded by the sheer volume of choices we face. This is the paradox of choice. In the modern world, you are bombarded with options. 100 types of cereal, 1,000 movies to stream, infinite career paths visible on social media. Logic suggests that more choice means more freedom, but psychology tells us that more choice means more anxiety. When you have 2 options, picking one is easy. When you have 50 options, picking one feels impossible because the likelihood that you are picking the absolute best one seems statistically low. The cost of this paralysis is heavy. It is not just about the time you lose, although that is significant. The real cost is the erosion of self-trust. Every time you tell yourself you are going to do something and then you freeze, you break a small promise to yourself. Over time, you stop trusting your own authority. You begin to feel like a passenger in your own life, watching opportunities drift by, feeling the frustration of potential that is never realized. Chronic indecision leads to a state of low-grade stress that never goes away. Because you have not decided, the problem remains open in your mind. It drains your battery. This is why you can spend a whole day doing nothing but worrying about a decision and end up more tired than if you had run a marathon. Even small decisions start to feel heavy. This is decision fatigue. Your willpower is a finite resource. If you spend all your energy agonizing over what to wear in the morning or what to write in a text message, you have nothing left for the big decisions that actually matter. You become emotionally attached to the outcome of minor things, treating every fork in the road as a final destination. Breaking this loop requires a fundamental shift in how you view the world. You must move from a mindset of certainty to a mindset of curiosity. You have to accept that you cannot know the future. You cannot predict the outcome with 100% accuracy, and that is okay. The antidote to paralysis is action. It sounds counterintuitive, but clarity follows action. It does not precede it. You cannot think your way out of a thinking problem. You have to act your way out. When you take a step, even a small, imperfect step, you get new data. You see the terrain differently. You learn. You must learn to value progress over perfection. A messy decision made today is often better than a perfect decision made next year. You have to redefine what a wrong decision means. A wrong decision is not a catastrophe. It is a data point. It is a lesson. It is course correction. The most successful people are not the ones who make the best decisions. They are the ones who make the most decisions and correct them the fastest. You need to rebuild your trust in yourself. You do this by making small choices and sticking to them. Pick the restaurant without looking at reviews. Send the email without reading it a 4th time. Buy the shirt. Sign up for the class. Prove to your brain that the world does not end when you act. Prove to yourself that you can handle the consequences, whatever they are. The goal is not to eliminate fear. The goal is to act alongside it. It is to recognize that the feeling of hesitation is just a feeling, not a stop sign. It is your brain trying to keep you safe in a way that no longer serves you. Ultimately, life is not a test with a pass or fail grade. It is a series of experiments. Some will work out beautifully, some will not. But the only true failure is standing still. The only true loss is the time you spend waiting for a map that will never arrive. The wrong decision can teach you something. No decision teaches you nothing. If you want to continue understanding the hidden mechanics of your mind and how to unlock your own potential, make the decision to subscribe to this channel. It is one small choice that leads to clarity. The fear behind every choice. To understand the freeze, we must look at what lies beneath the surface of the hesitation. It is rarely a lack of information that stops you. In the modern world, we are drowning in information. If data were the answer, you would have made your choice weeks ago. The barrier is not intellectual, it is emotional. Specifically, it is fear. But it is not the loud panic of being chased by a predator. It is a quiet, insidious fear that whispers that safety lies in stillness. This phase of decision paralysis is driven by the fear of regret. When you stand before two or more options, your brain immediately begins to calculate the potential loss involved in each one. We tend to think of decision-making as the act of picking a winner, but psychologically to choose is to lose. When you select one path, you are simultaneously killing every other possibility. You are saying goodbye to the versions of your life that could have happened down those other roads. This triggers a sense of grief before you have even begun. The human mind is wired to be loss-averse. We feel the pain of losing something twice as intensely as we feel the pleasure of gaining something. This means the fear of picking the wrong path weighs heavier than the excitement of picking the right one. You become fixated on the potential error. You imagine a future where you look back and say, "I made a mistake." That hypothetical future regret becomes a present tense prison. You are not paralyzed by the present. You are paralyzed by a ghost from a future that has not happened yet. This brings us to the role of perfectionism. We often wear perfectionism like a badge of honor. We think it means we have high standards or that we care deeply about quality. In the context of decision paralysis, perfectionism is not a virtue, it is a shield. It is a defense mechanism designed to protect your ego from the shame of being wrong. The perfectionist believes that there is a single perfect solution to every problem. They believe that if they just analyze the variables long enough and think hard enough, they can discover the golden path that guarantees success without any downsides. This is a delusion. Life is not a math problem with a single variable to solve. It is a chaotic system of trade-offs. Every choice has a cost. Every path has a flaw. When you demand perfection from your decisions, you are demanding certainty in an uncertain world. Your brain enters a loop of overanalysis. You gather more data, hoping it will reveal the perfect answer. You read more reviews. You ask for more advice. You simulate every worst-case scenario. This feels like work. It feels like you are being responsible and thorough, but in reality you are stalling. You are trying to gather enough evidence to guarantee that you will not feel pain later. You are waiting for a guarantee that does not exist. This overanalysis is what drains your confidence. The more you stare at the options, the more complex they appear. The flaws in every choice become magnified under the microscope of your anxiety. What started as a simple preference evolves into a crisis of identity. You begin to question your own judgment. You wonder why other people seem to move through life so easily, while you get stuck on the smallest details. It is important to recognize that this is not a sign of incompetence. It is a sign that your brain's safety system is overactive. Your mind perceives the risk of a bad decision as a threat to your survival. In the past, making a wrong turn might have meant physical danger. Today, the danger is social and psychological. We fear judgment. We fear looking foolish. We fear the heavy burden of responsibility. When you refuse to decide, you maintain the illusion of infinite potential. As long as you do not choose, you have not failed. All options are still on the table. You are safe in the realm of possibility. But this safety is a trap. It is a comfortable cage that keeps you from moving forward. The relief you feel by postponing the decision is temporary. It is quickly replaced by a low-grade anxiety that runs in the background of your day. This anxiety bleeds into the rest of your life. It affects how you sleep and how you interact with others. It consumes mental energy that should be used for creativity and connection. You carry the unmade decision with you like a heavy stone in your pocket. It is always there weighing you down, reminding you that you are stuck. We must also look at how this fear distorts the size of the decision. When you are in a state of paralysis, small choices begin to feel life-altering. Picking a place to eat dinner or choosing a font for a presentation takes on the emotional weight of buying a house. This happens because the muscle of decision-making has fatigued. Your ability to prioritize has been eroded by the constant friction of fear. Everything feels important because everything feels dangerous. The brain struggles to distinguish between high stakes and low stakes when it is in a state of chronic stress. The fear of being wrong applies just as much to the trivial as it does to the monumental. You become worried that a bad dinner choice will ruin the evening, or that a bad font will ruin your professional reputation. The logic centers of your brain are being drowned out by the emotional centers. This leads to a paradox. You want to make the best decision to maximize your happiness, but the process of agonizing over the decision destroys your happiness before you even start. You are so terrified of future regret that you are creating present misery. You are sacrificing your peace of mind on the altar of a perfect outcome. Understanding this mechanism is the first step toward dismantling it. You have to see that the paralysis is not keeping you safe. It is hurting you. The pain of remaining stuck is often greater than the pain of making a wrong turn. A wrong turn can be corrected. You can pivot. You can learn. You can adapt. But standing still teaches you nothing. The fear acts as a fog. It obscures the reality that most decisions are reversible. We treat choices like they are etched in stone, but most are written in sand. The catastrophic thinking that drives the paralysis rarely matches the reality of the outcome. Even if you choose poorly, the world will not end. You will handle it. You have handled difficulties before, and you will handle them again. The trust you are looking for is not trust in the outcome. It is trust in yourself. It is knowing that no matter what happens, you have the resilience to cope with it. The perfectionist tries to control the future to avoid pain. The healthy decision maker trusts their ability to handle pain if it comes. So when you feel that familiar freeze take over, recognize it for what it is. It is not wisdom. It is not prudence. It is fear dressed up as logic. It is your mind trying to protect you from a regret that has not happened. It is a desperate attempt to avoid the messiness of real life. But life is messy. Progress is messy. The clarity you are waiting for will not come while you are standing on the sidelines. Clarity is the result of movement. You figure out where to go by going. You figure out who you are by choosing. The silence of indecision offers no answers. Only the noise of action provides the feedback you need to navigate the world. We must learn to look at the fear without blinking. We must accept that regret is a possibility, but stagnation is a certainty. The goal is not to eliminate the fear of choosing wrong. The goal is to fear standing still more than you fear making a mistake. The cost of not deciding is the only cost you cannot afford to pay. Overthinking as self-protection. You tell yourself you are just being thorough. You tell yourself that a smart person looks at every angle before making a move. You convince yourself that you are strategizing, planning, and preparing for the best possible outcome. This is the great lie of decision paralysis. It wraps itself in the language of responsibility, but underneath the logic and the spreadsheets and the endless mental debates, something much more primal is happening. You are not solving a problem, you are building a shelter. And overthinking is not a sign of high intelligence, although intelligent people are often the most prone to it. Overthinking is a defense mechanism. It is a form of self-protection. When you find yourself stuck in the loop of weighing option A against option B for the 100th time, your brain is not trying to find the truth. It is trying to find safety. To understand this, we have to look at what happens when you make a choice. Every decision, no matter how small, requires you to step into the unknown. Even if you are 90% sure of the outcome, that remaining 10% creates a gap. In that gap lies the potential for failure. in that gap lies the possibility of regret. To your modern mind, a wrong choice might just mean a minor inconvenience or a little bit of embarrassment. But to the ancient parts of your brain, the parts wired for survival, the unknown is a threat. When you freeze, you are not simply lazy or indecisive. You're engaging in a high-energy emotional blockade. Your mind perceives the decision as a potential danger. It could be the danger of losing money, the danger of looking foolish, or the danger of realizing you are not as competent as you hoped. To prevent this pain, your brain hits the pause button. It floods you with questions. What if there is a better option? What if I regret this in a month? What if I am overlooking a critical detail? These questions feel like due diligence. They feel like work. That is why overthinking is so seductive. It mimics the feeling of productivity. You can spend 3 hours researching the perfect laptop, reading reviews, comparing specifications, and watching videos. At the end of those 3 hours, you are exhausted. You feel like you have done a hard day of work. But in reality, you have not moved an inch. You are exactly where you started, only more tired and more confused. This is the safety trap. As long as you are thinking, you do not have to act. As long as you are analyzing, you are safe from judgment. You cannot fail if you never actually start. You cannot be rejected if you never submit the application. You cannot choose the wrong path if you stay standing at the crossroads staring at the map. Overthinking is the art of staying at the crossroads and telling yourself you are just studying the terrain. We often mistake this behavior for perfectionism. We wear perfectionism like a badge of honor. We say we have high standards. We say we want things done right. But perfectionism in this context is not about the pursuit of excellence. It is about the avoidance of blame. It is a heavy suit of armor you wear to protect yourself from the sting of criticism, whether that criticism comes from others or from your own internal voice. The perfectionist waits for the conditions to be ideal. They wait for their skills to be flawless. They wait for the guarantee that the outcome will be successful. But life offers no such guarantees. The demand for certainty is the fuel that keeps the engine of overthinking running. You keep searching for that one piece of information that will make the decision risk-free. You read one more article. You ask one more friend for advice. You simulate the conversation in your head one more time. You are looking for a permission slip from reality that says you will not get hurt. That permission slip does not exist. The tragedy of this self-protection strategy is that it ends up causing the exact pain you are trying to avoid. You overthink to avoid the pain of a bad decision, but the process of overthinking is itself painful. It creates a chronic, low-level anxiety that hums in the background of your life. It drains your mental battery. It makes you less present with your family and friends because a part of you is always elsewhere, churning through the variables of an unresolved problem. Think about the mental load you carry when you leave a decision open. It is like having a computer with too many tabs open. The fan starts whirring. The system slows down. Everything becomes difficult. You might think you are saving energy by not committing to a choice, but holding the decision in suspension requires a tremendous amount of active energy. You are juggling possibilities, constantly refreshing the fear of what might go wrong. This protective mechanism also distorts your perception of time. When you are stuck in analysis paralysis, time feels infinite. You feel like you can just keep thinking until the answer reveals itself. But in the real world, time is the one resource you cannot renew. Opportunities have expiration dates. While you are protecting yourself from the risk of a wrong choice, the opportunity to choose at all might quietly slip away. The job gets filled, the house gets sold, the relationship fades. The irony is sharp. By trying so hard to protect yourself from regret, you manufacture a different kind of regret. The regret of inaction. The regret of standing still while the world moved forward. It is important to recognize that this behavior often stems from a lack of self-trust. Somewhere along the line, you learned that you could not trust yourself to handle the consequences of a mistake. Perhaps you were punished severely for small errors in the past. Perhaps you have a memory of a time you acted impulsively and paid a heavy price. Your brain logged those events and wrote a new rule. The rule says that safety lies in hesitation. The rule says that if you just think long enough, you can outsmart reality. Breaking this habit requires you to see overthinking for what it really is. It is not intelligence. It is fear dressed up as logic. It is a wall you build to keep out the unknown. When you catch yourself spinning in circles, deep in the details of a choice that should have been made days ago, stop and ask yourself what you are defending against. What is the specific pain you are trying to avoid? Usually, it is the pain of being wrong. But being wrong is a necessary part of the human experience. It is the raw material for growth. When you overthink, you are rejecting the learning process. You are demanding that you get the lesson before you take the test. Real safety does not come from perfect analysis. Real safety comes from knowing that even if you make the wrong choice, you have the resilience to handle it. It comes from trusting that you can course correct. It comes from understanding that a decision is not a cliff you fall off, but a door you walk through. If you don't like the room you enter, there are other doors. But as long as you stay in the hallway, debating which handle to turn, you remain stuck in the grey, exhausting limbo of indecision. You remain safe from failure, yes. But you also remain safe from success, safe from joy, and safe from life itself. This mechanism of protection is powerful, but it is brittle. It relies on the illusion that you can control the future by thinking about it. Once you see through that illusion, the grip of paralysis begins to loosen. You start to realize that the anxiety of the unknown is manageable, but the weight of never deciding is unbearable. As we move deeper into this, we have to look at the environment that feeds this beast. It is not just your internal fear, it is the world around you. We live in an era that has weaponized choice. We are drowning in options, and each option is a new opportunity for your brain to trigger this protective freeze. When the menu is too large, the hunger for safety grows stronger. We must understand how the sheer volume of modern life turns this protective instinct into a daily crisis. Hidden triggers from the past. You might be looking at a decision right now and wondering why it feels so heavy. The stakes might seem low to an outsider. It could be as simple as choosing an email subject line or picking a restaurant for dinner, yet your chest tightens, your mind goes blank. You feel a familiar sense of dread that does not match the situation in front of you. This is because you are not just battling the choice in the present moment. You are battling a ghost from your past. We often imagine decision paralysis as a problem of the future. We think we are frozen because we are afraid of what might happen. But in reality, we are often frozen because of what has already happened. Our brains are archives of history. Every time you have made a choice that led to pain, embarrassment, or loss, your mind filed that event away in a folder labeled danger. This is the hidden trigger of past failure. Think back to a time when you acted with confidence. Maybe you were younger. You made a choice impulsively. You trusted your gut. And then it went wrong. Perhaps it was a financial investment that tanked. Maybe it was a relationship you fought for that ended in heartbreak. Or it could be something much smaller from your childhood, like speaking up in class and getting the answer wrong, causing the whole room to laugh. That moment of shame was not just an isolated event. It was a lesson. Your brain, in its attempt to keep you safe, wrote a new rule. It said that confidence is dangerous. It said that trusting yourself leads to pain. Now, years later, you stand before a new decision. Logic tells you this is safe. But your subconscious mind is screaming. It is pulling up the file from 10 years ago and flashing a warning light. It is telling you that if you choose, you might get hurt again. So you freeze. You wait. You overthink. You are not trying to make the best decision. You are trying to avoid a repeat of an old wound. This mechanism is subtle. It does not always announce itself with a clear memory. You do not always think, I remember that time I failed in 3rd grade. Instead, it manifests as a vague anxiety. It feels like a physical resistance to moving forward. The trigger is hidden, buried under layers of time. But its grip on your behavior is ironclad. There is another layer to this historical weight. It is not just about specific failures. It is often about the expectations placed upon you long ago. Many people who struggle with decision paralysis were praised for being intelligent or responsible when they were children. You might have been the kid who always got good grades. You were the one who always did the right thing. You were the sensible one. This sounds like a positive foundation, but it creates a fragile trap. When your identity is built on being right, being smart, or being perfect, a wrong decision is not just a mistake. It is a threat to who you are. If you make a bad choice, does that mean you are no longer the smart one? Does it mean you are no longer reliable? This pressure transforms every small decision into a referendum on your character. You are not just choosing a paint color for the living room. You are proving your competence. You are defending your identity. This high bar of expectation means you cannot afford to be wrong. And if you cannot afford to be wrong, you cannot afford to choose. The safest option is to stall. As long as you do not decide, you technically haven't failed yet. You remain in a state of potential perfection, suspended in the air, never landing but never crashing. This is why high achievers are often the most paralyzed by indecision. They have the most to lose in their own minds. They carry a backpack of past victories that they are terrified of dropping. Let us look deeper into the trigger of regret. Regret is a powerful teacher, but it can also be a cruel warden. If you have a history of looking back and agonizing over what could have been, your brain learns to fear the aftermath of a decision more than the decision itself. You might be the kind of person who buys a shirt and then spends 2 weeks wondering if you should have bought the blue one instead. You might accept a job offer and immediately scour the internet to see if you missed out on something better. This habit of post-decision torture creates a feedback loop. Your brain anticipates this future regret before you have even made a move. It knows that as soon as you pick option A, you will mourn the loss of option B. To save you from that future pain, it stops you from picking option A in the first place. It is a protective strategy that backfires. By trying to save you from the sting of regret, your mind traps you in the agony of limbo. These triggers from the past are not flaws in your character. They are biological adaptations. Your brain is a prediction machine. It uses past data to predict future outcomes. If the data says that making decisions leads to pain, shame, or regret, the machine will hit the brakes. This is why you cannot simply logic your way out of paralysis. You can make a pros and cons list. You can analyze the statistics. You can ask for advice. But if your nervous system remembers the burn of a past mistake, it will override your logic. It is the hand pulling back from the fire before you even feel the heat. It is important to recognize that the intensity of your paralysis is often a clue to the size of the hidden trigger. If you are freezing up over a decision that should be simple, ask yourself what this situation reminds you of. What is the emotional echo here? Are you afraid of losing money because of that one time you were broke? Are you afraid of speaking up because of that one time you were silenced? Are you afraid of commitment because of that one time you were abandoned? The current decision is rarely the real problem. The current decision is just the screen upon which the past is projecting its movie. When you understand this, the shame begins to dissolve. You realize you are not lazy. You are not indecisive by nature. You are simply protecting yourself from a threat that no longer exists in the same way. The ghost is real to your mind, but it cannot actually hurt you in the present. These hidden triggers also deplete your self-trust. Trust is like a muscle. It grows when we use it. But every time you defer a decision, or every time you dwell on a past mistake, that muscle atrophies. You start to look for external validation. You ask 5 friends for their opinion before you buy a pair of shoes. You read 50 reviews before you buy a toaster. You are trying to outsource the risk. If someone else tells you what to do, then it is not your fault if it goes wrong. This is a direct response to that historical pain. You are trying to abdicate the responsibility so you do not have to feel the guilt of a wrong choice again. But this outsourcing only reinforces the cycle. The more you rely on others or on endless research, the less you trust your own internal compass. You become disconnected from your own preferences. You forget what you actually want because you are so focused on what is the objectively correct choice that will prevent criticism. We have to acknowledge that the world has changed since those original triggers were formed. The stakes are rarely as high as your nervous system believes them to be. The laughter in the classroom is gone. The financial mistake of your 20s does not define your financial reality forever. You are operating on outdated software. Your past is trying to keep you safe, but it is keeping you stuck. It is holding you in a small, confined room where nothing can go wrong, but where nothing can ever change. As we move forward, we need to see these triggers for what they are. They are old scars, not open wounds. They are memories, not prophecies. You have survived every wrong decision you have ever made. You are still here. The catastrophe your mind fears has usually already happened, and you lived through it. Recognizing the source of this fear is the first step in dismantling it. It allows you to separate the decision in front of you from the trauma behind you. However, even when we understand our internal history, we are still faced with the reality of the modern world. We have discussed the internal pressure. But we must also look at the external pressure, because once you manage to quiet the ghosts of the past, you open your eyes to a new problem. You look around and realize that the world is shouting at you with a million different voices. The sheer volume of opportunity in the modern age is enough to paralyze even the most healed mind. We have cleared the internal fog only to find ourselves standing in a labyrinth of infinite doors. This brings us to the next great barrier in the psychology of paralysis. It is time to look at what happens when the problem isn't that you are afraid to choose, but that there is simply too much to choose from. When too many options hurt you. We have been sold a specific story about freedom. From the time we are very young, we are taught that having more choices means having more control. We believe that an abundance of options leads to a higher quality of life. If you have 10 career paths, surely one of them is the perfect fit. If you have 1,000 potential partners on a screen in your pocket, surely one of them is your soulmate. If you have 50 types of jam at the grocery store, surely one of them will taste exactly the way you want it to. Logic tells us that more options should lead to better outcomes. If there are only 2 pairs of jeans in the store, you have to settle for the one that fits okay. But if there are 100 pairs, you should be able to find the one that fits perfectly. Therefore, more choice should equal more satisfaction. But experience tells us something very different. We stand in the aisle of the supermarket, staring at a wall of toothpaste, and we feel a low hum of anxiety. We scroll through streaming services for 45 minutes, watching trailers and reading summaries, only to turn the television off without watching anything. We hesitate to commit to a social plan because something better might come along. This is where the modern mind begins to crack under the weight of its own freedom. This is the paradox of choice. When the number of options increases, the psychological cost of making a decision goes up. It stops being a simple selection and becomes a complex cognitive burden. To understand why this happens, we have to look at how the brain processes value and loss. Every time you choose one thing, you are simultaneously rejecting everything else. When there are only 2 options, A and B, choosing A means you only lose B. The opportunity cost is small. The mental calculation is manageable. You can easily weigh the pros and cons. Now imagine you have 50 options. If you choose option A, you are now rejecting 49 other possibilities. You are saying no to option B, option C, option D, and all the way down the line. Your brain does not just see the one thing you gained. It subconsciously tallies the 49 things you lost. This creates a phantom sense of loss that hangs over the decision. You start to wonder if option 17 had better features. You worry that option 32 was a better value. The sheer volume of unchosen paths dilutes the satisfaction you feel with the path you actually took. This leads to a specific type of psychological pain known as regret anticipation. Before you have even made a move, you are already afraid of regretting it. You are trying to predict the future emotional state of disappointment and avoid it. The more options you have, the higher the probability that one of the unchosen options was actually better than your choice. The math works against you. With 2 options, you have a 50% chance of being right. With 100 options, you have a 99% chance of missing out on the absolute best choice. That statistical reality creates a subtle, paralyzing fear. It forces you into a state of hyperanalysis. You read reviews, you compare specifications, you ask friends. You look for the perfect answer because the cost of being wrong feels enormous when the options are limitless. This brings us to the escalation of expectations. In a world with limited choice, we are easily satisfied. If there is only one hotel in the town you are visiting, you do not expect it to be a palace. If the bed is clean and the roof doesn't leak, you are satisfied. You have low expectations, so you are pleasantly surprised when things are decent. But in a world of infinite choice, our expectations hit the ceiling. If there are 500 hotels, and you spend hours researching to pick the absolute best one, you expect perfection. You have invested time and mental energy. You have filtered through the noise. So when you arrive and the pillow is slightly too hard, or the view isn't exactly like the photo, you feel cheated. You feel disappointment not because the hotel is bad, but because your expectations were impossibly high. The abundance of choice convinced you that perfection was available, and because you did not find it, you feel like you failed. This is the darkest part of having too many options. It shifts the blame from the world to you. When there are limited options and you have a bad experience, you blame the world. You say the store had a bad selection. You say the dating pool in this town is small. You are not responsible for the outcome because you did not really have a choice. However, when the options are endless, you have no one to blame but yourself. If you buy a pair of jeans that are uncomfortable, and there were thousands of other pairs available, the fault lies with you. You picked the wrong one. You are the variable that failed. This internalization of failure is toxic to self-trust. It makes you feel incompetent. It makes you question your own judgment. You begin to believe that you are bad at making decisions, but you are not. You are simply operating in an environment that is biologically unnatural. The human brain evolved to make binary choices: fight or flight, eat or starve, safe or dangerous. We are not wired to compare 50 subtle variations of the same outcome. We must also consider the phenomenon of decision fatigue. Your willpower and your ability to make smart choices are limited resources. They are like a battery. Every single time you make a choice, you drain a little bit of that battery. We often ignore the tiny micro decisions we make all day. What to wear, what to eat for breakfast, which email to answer first, which podcast to listen to, which route to drive. By the time you get to the big decisions, the ones that actually matter for your career or your relationships, your battery is empty. You hit a wall. This is why intelligent, capable people often find themselves eating junk food at night or watching mindless television. They are not lazy. They are exhausted. They have spent their entire daily allowance of decision-making power on trivial things because the modern world demanded it. When the brain is tired, it defaults to the path of least resistance. It chooses the default option. Or more dangerously, it chooses nothing at all. This is where options hurt you the most. They trick you into thinking you are making progress when you are actually just spinning your wheels. You spend 3 hours researching the perfect workout plan, but you never do a single push-up. You spend weeks looking for the best productivity software, but you never do the work. The act of browsing becomes a substitute for the act of doing. The abundance of information gives you a false sense of productivity. You feel like you are working towards a solution because you are analyzing the options. But analysis is not action. The pursuit of the best option is the enemy of the good option. There is a term for people who always need the absolute best result. They are called maximizers. Maximizers are miserable. They are constantly looking over their shoulder to see if they could have done better. On the other hand, there are satisficers. These are people who have criteria for what they need, and the moment they find something that meets those criteria, they take it. They do not worry if there was something slightly better 3 pages down. They accept the good enough, and ironically, they end up happier. We have to understand that the perfect choice does not exist. It is a mirage created by the abundance of options. The grass always looks greener on the other side of the fence, especially when there are 1,000 other fences. You must begin to see this overload for what it is. It is not freedom. It is noise. It is a cage disguised as a horizon. The anxiety you feel when you cannot decide is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that your brain is trying to protect you from the pain of regret. It is trying to optimize a situation that cannot be optimized. When you refuse to choose, you think you are keeping your options open. You think you are saving yourself for the perfect moment or the perfect outcome. But while you are standing still, time is moving. The options that are available to you today will not be available forever. The pain of making a choice and being wrong is acute. It stings. But the pain of staring at the options until they wither away is chronic. It is a dull ache that settles into your bones. We have explored why the brain freezes. We have looked at the fear of regret and the hidden triggers from your past. Now we see how the environment itself, this modern landscape of infinite variety, conspires to keep you stuck. But understanding the trap is only half the battle. You see the walls of the cage now. You understand that more is not better. You understand that the search for perfection is actually a search for safety that does not exist. The question remains, what happens when you stay in this state for too long? What is the actual price of this paralysis? It is easy to think that indecision is safe, that it is neutral, but indecision is an action in itself. And like all actions, it has consequences. As we move forward, we must look at the bill that comes due when we refuse to order. We must look at what happens to a life that is spent in the waiting room. The cost is higher than you think, and it is paid in a currency you can never earn back. The weight of small things. You are standing in the aisle of a grocery store. It is a Tuesday evening. The fluorescent lights hum overhead with a sterile electric buzz. You are tired. All you need to do is choose a jar of pasta sauce. It should be the easiest task of your day. Yet you find yourself staring at the shelf for 2 minutes, then 3, then 5. There are 40 different options. Garlic and herb, traditional basil, spicy marinara, organic, generic, imported. Your hand hovers. You reach for one jar and then pull back. You worry that it might be too sweet. You look at the price of another and wonder if the quality justifies the cost. You scan the ingredients list of a third. A strange heaviness settles in your chest. It is a physical weight. Your mind begins to fog over. You feel a creeping sense of irritation mixed with a profound exhaustion. You think to yourself that this is ridiculous. It is just dinner. It does not matter. But your brain refuses to release the brake. This is the weight of small things. We often assume that decision paralysis is reserved for the crossroads of life. We expect to freeze when choosing a career path or deciding whether to marry or buying a house. We respect the gravity of those moments. But the most insidious form of paralysis does not happen at the crossroads. It happens in the mundane corners of a Tuesday evening. It happens when you cannot pick a movie to watch on a Friday night and end up scrolling for an hour until it is too late to watch anything at all. It happens when you write an email and rewrite the subject line 10 times. To understand why this happens, you must look at the economy of your mind. We like to imagine that our capacity for making choices is infinite. We believe that we can weigh pros and cons all day long with the same level of mental sharpness. But psychology tells us a different story. Your willpower and your decision-making ability are finite resources. They are like a battery. Every single time you exercise choice, you drain a small amount of power from that battery. Consider your average morning. You choose whether to hit snooze. You choose what to wear. You choose to look at your phone. You choose which notification to open. You choose coffee or tea. You choose a podcast or silence. By the time you sit down at your desk to begin your actual work, you may have already made hundreds of micro decisions. Your brain does not distinguish between the trivial and the vital in terms of energy expenditure. The neurochemical process required to select a pair of socks is remarkably similar to the process required to approve a budget. It all burns glucose. It all demands executive function. When you reach that aisle in the grocery store, your battery is flashing red. You are suffering from decision fatigue. Your brain is pleading with you to stop processing data. It wants to shut down. But the modern world does not allow for shutdowns. It demands constant curation. We are drowning in a sea of hyper-choice. In previous generations, the constraints of life limited these drains on our energy. There were 3 television channels. There were 2 kinds of bread. The lack of options was a form of freedom. It saved the mind for the things that truly mattered. Today, you are the CEO of everything. You are the curator of your entertainment, the manager of your diet, the architect of your social media presence. The weight of these small things accumulates. It is not one single snowflake that breaks the branch. It is the heavy wet drift of thousands of them piling up hour after hour. However, fatigue is only half of the equation. There is a deeper psychological current running beneath this stillness. It is the fear of the suboptimal. We live in a culture that obsesses over optimization. We are told that there is a best way to sleep, and a best way to eat, and a best way to exercise. We are trained to believe that life is a puzzle with a perfect solution, and if we just analyze the data long enough, we can find it. When you freeze over a menu at a restaurant, it is often because you are terrified of wasting the experience. You want the meal to be perfect. You fear the regret of looking at your companion's plate and wishing you had ordered what they have. This is perfectionism masquerading as preference. You are trying to maximize the utility of a sandwich. You have attached your sense of satisfaction and control to an outcome that is statistically insignificant. This need for control is a defense mechanism. When the big parts of our lives feel chaotic or overwhelming, we clamp down on the small parts. You might not be able to control the economy or the stability of your job or the health of a family member. Those are giant, terrifying variables. But you can control which toothbrush you buy. So, your brain pours all of its anxious energy into that small, safe container. It convinces you that if you make the right choice here, you are safe. You are competent. You are in charge. The tragedy is that this mechanism backfires. Instead of feeling in control, you feel trapped. The stakes feel artificially high. If you choose the wrong movie on Netflix, it feels like a personal failure. You berate yourself for wasting time. The internal dialogue becomes harsh. You ask yourself why you cannot just make a simple decision. You label yourself as indecisive or weak. This lowers your self-trust. When you cannot trust yourself to handle the small things, you begin to doubt your ability to handle the big things. It is a corrosive cycle. The man who stands paralyzed in the cereal aisle eventually becomes the man who stays in a job he hates because the energy required to leave is simply not there. The muscle of decision-making has atrophied from overuse on the trivial. There is also the phenomenon of the open loop. In psychology, this is related to the Zeigarnik effect, which states that we remember incomplete tasks better than completed ones. Every decision you delay is an incomplete task. It is a mental tab left open in the background of your browser. You might walk away from the email you need to send because you cannot decide on the phrasing. You think you are taking a break, but your brain does not take a break. It holds that unmade decision in suspension. It reserves a portion of your cognitive RAM to keep track of it. Multiply this by 10 or 20 deferred choices. A text message you have not replied to. A purchase you are researching but have not made. An appointment you need to schedule. These open loops create a background hum of anxiety. They weigh you down even when you are not thinking about them directly. They create a sense of chronic overwhelm. You feel busy, but you are not moving. You are vibrating with the tension of potential energy that has nowhere to go. The paralysis over small things is also a symptom of a disconnect from your own intuition. We have become so reliant on external data to guide us that we have forgotten how to listen to our own gut. We look at reviews for a toaster as if the internet knows better than we do what we need. We outsource our judgment to the crowd. We want 5-star certainty in a 3-star world. When the data is conflicting or the reviews are mixed, we freeze because we have no internal compass to break the tie. We are waiting for permission to choose. You must understand that this heaviness is not a character flaw. It is a mismatch between your biology and your environment. Your brain evolved to make survival decisions based on scarcity. It evolved to decide between fight or flight. It did not evolve to decide between 50 shades of white paint for the living room. The stress response you feel is real. The cortisol pumping through your veins is real. Recognizing this is the first step toward lifting the weight. You are not broken because you cannot decide what to eat for lunch. You are just a human being operating in a high-stakes environment of low-stakes choices. The fatigue you feel is a signal. It is your mind telling you that it is protecting you from the danger of making a mistake, even when the mistake would cost you nothing. The cost of this paralysis is high. It is not just the time lost staring at a screen or a shelf. It is the joy that is stolen from the experience. When you turn a simple choice into a complex analysis, you strip the pleasure from it. A movie becomes a test. A meal becomes a wager. You are so busy trying to get it right that you forget to experience it. As we move toward understanding how to break this loop, we have to accept a hard truth. The relief you are looking for will not come from more information. It will not come from finding the perfect option. The relief comes from letting go of the need for the option to be perfect. It comes from accepting that the weight of small things is only heavy because we refuse to set it down. We carry the burden of the unchosen path, believing that if we just think a little longer, we can cheat the reality of trade-offs. But life is nothing but trade-offs. And the peace you seek is on the other side of the choice you are afraid to make. The cost of not deciding, you might believe that standing still is safe. You might think that by delaying a decision you are preventing a mistake. It feels like a pause button. You tell yourself that you are gathering information or waiting for the right moment. But this is the great deception of paralysis. There is no pause button. The world does not stop spinning simply because you have stopped moving. We tend to view a decision as a fork in the road. We stand at the intersection staring down 2 different paths trying to predict the weather on each route. We think that as long as we stand at the fork, we are safe from the storm. But the reality is that the fork in the road is not a stationary place. It is a moving walkway. And while you stand there debating left or right, the walkway is carrying you toward a third destination that you did not choose at all. That destination is regret. This is the hidden cost of not deciding. We often calculate the risk of making the wrong choice. We list the pros and cons of taking the job or moving the city or ending the relationship. We obsess over what we might lose if we get it wrong. But we rarely calculate the cost of doing nothing. We rarely measure the price of the status quo. The first cost is the invisible tax on your mental energy. An unmade decision is not silent. It is noisy. It sits in the back of your mind like a program running in the background of a computer. It drains your battery even when you are not actively looking at it. Every time you remember that you still haven't made that phone call or sent that email or chosen that path, your brain fires a signal of stress. It is a loop of unfinished business. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect, which suggests that our brains remember incomplete tasks better than completed ones. Your mind wants closure. When you deny it closure by refusing to decide, you force your brain to carry the heavy load of the open loop. This is why you feel exhausted even when you have accomplished nothing. You are tired not from the work you did, but from the work you are avoiding. You are carrying the weight of 100 potential futures instead of walking the path of one actual present. The second cost is far more damaging because it affects how you see yourself. Every time you face a choice and retreat, you send a signal to your subconscious. You are telling yourself that you do not trust your own judgment. You are reinforcing the belief that you are not capable of handling the consequences of your actions. This erosion of self-trust is subtle. It does not happen overnight. It happens one hesitation at a time. Eventually, you stop looking at yourself as the driver of your life. You begin to feel like a passenger. You feel like life is something that happens to you rather than something you create. You look at others who are moving forward and you wonder what secret knowledge they possess. You assume they are smarter, or braver, or more certain, but the truth is they simply decided to trust themselves enough to handle the mistake if they made one. When you refuse to decide, you are prioritizing the comfort of the present over the potential of the future. You are choosing the known pain of stagnation over the unknown pain of growth. It feels safer to stay in a job you dislike than to risk failure in a new career. It feels safer to stay in a vague relationship than to risk the heartbreak of a breakup or the vulnerability of commitment. But this safety is an illusion. It is a cage. There is a concept in economics called opportunity cost. It means that for every hour you spend doing one thing, you give up the chance to do something else. In the realm of psychology, the opportunity cost of indecision is your life. While you are busy weighing the options, the opportunity often quietly expires. The job position closes, the person moves on, the market changes, the inspiration fades. You are left holding on to a perfect plan for a world that no longer exists. You tried so hard to avoid making the wrong move that you made no move at all. And in the game of life, standing still is often the most dangerous move you can make. We must also talk about the nature of regret. Research suggests that in the short term, we tend to regret actions that led to bad outcomes. We regret saying the wrong thing or buying the wrong car. But in the long term, the data shifts dramatically. Over the course of a lifetime, people do not regret the things they did. They regret the things they did not do. They regret the silence. They regret the hesitation. They regret the years they spent waiting for permission that never came. The pain of a wrong decision is acute, but it heals. You make a mess, you clean it up, you learn a lesson. You gain data. You become wiser. But the pain of indecision is chronic. It is a dull ache that never goes away because it is based on fantasy. When you do not choose, you get to keep the fantasy of what might have been. As long as you do not write the book remains a perfect masterpiece in your head. As long as you do not ask for the promotion, you can imagine that you would have gotten it. Indecision protects the perfection of your potential, but potential is worthless if it is never realized. Realizing your potential requires you to kill the fantasy. It requires you to bring your idea out of the perfect realm of your mind and into the messy realm of reality. In reality, things might break. People might criticize you. You might fail. But in reality, you are also alive. You are participating. You are learning. The person who makes a wrong decision and fails has learned something valuable about the world and about themselves. They have data they can use to make a better decision next time. The person who makes no decision learns nothing. They are trapped in the same loop of ignorance and fear. They have not moved an inch. Consider the cumulative effect of this paralysis over a decade. The compounding interest of inaction is stagnation. You wake up 10 years from now in the exact same emotional and physical place, but with less time remaining. That is the ultimate cost. Time is the one resource you cannot renew. Every moment you spend trembling at the threshold is a moment you are not living in the room. You might be waiting for certainty. You want a guarantee that if you jump, the net will appear. You want to know the end of the story before you read the first page. But life does not offer guarantees. It only offers chances. The demand for certainty is the enemy of progress. To break this cycle, you must accept that there is no perfect choice. There is no path without rocks. There is no route without rain. The goal of decision-making is not to eliminate risk. It is to choose which risk you are willing to take. Do you want the risk of trying and failing, or the risk of never trying at all? Do you want the pain of growth or the pain of decay? Both paths hurt. But one kind of pain transforms you while the other kind of pain consumes you. When you finally understand the cost of not deciding, the fear of making a mistake begins to shrink. You realize that a mistake is just a stepping stone. But being stuck is a tomb. A wrong turn can be corrected with a steering wheel, but a car that is parked in the garage is going nowhere. You do not need more information. You do not need more time. You do not need to feel perfectly ready. You need to accept that the heavy feeling in your chest is not going to go away by thinking about it. It will only go away by walking through it. The price you pay for indecision is your own potential. It is the version of you that exists on the other side of the choice. That version of you is waiting, but they will not wait forever. The door is open, the clock is ticking, the cost is rising. It is time to stop calculating and start living. Rebuilding trust in yourself. We arrive now at the most critical casualty of decision paralysis. It is not the time you lost. It is not the opportunities you missed. Those things are external. The greatest loss is internal. It is the erosion of your relationship with yourself. Think about how you treat a friend who constantly cancels plans, a friend who says they will do something and then never does it. Eventually, you stop believing them. You stop relying on them. You might still like them, but you do not trust them. When you live in a state of chronic indecision, you become that unreliable friend to yourself. Every time you say you will decide tomorrow, and you do not, you register a small internal defeat. Every time you agonize for hours over a simple email, you send a signal to your brain that you are not capable of handling simple threats. This is how self-trust is broken. It is not shattered in one giant moment. It is worn down like a stone in a river by thousands of moments of hesitation. You have taught your brain that your judgment is dangerous. You have taught your nervous system that making a choice results in pain. So now when you try to move forward, your mind pulls the emergency brake. To rebuild this trust, we must reverse the process. We must understand that trust is not a gift you give yourself. It is a reputation you earn with yourself. You cannot simply decide to be confident. Confidence is nothing more than the memory of having survived previous risks. You build it by creating a new track record. The mistake most people make is waiting for the feeling of certainty before they act. They want to feel ready. They want the fear to go away first. But the psychology of human action shows us that this is impossible. The fear does not leave while you are standing on the edge. The fear only leaves after you have jumped. Clarity is not a prerequisite for action. Clarity is a result of action. This means you must begin to act before you feel ready. You must make decisions while your hands are still shaking. This sounds terrifying, but it is actually the only path to safety. You have to prove to your primitive brain that the act of choosing is not fatal. We start this process by lowering the stakes. You cannot walk into the gym after 10 years on the couch and try to lift the heaviest weight. You would crush yourself. Yet this is exactly what you do mentally. You wait until a decision is massive and life-changing, and then you try to force yourself to be decisive. When you fail, you use it as proof that you are broken. The rebuilding process begins with micro-decisions. It begins with the lunch menu. It begins with the route you drive to work. It begins with the shirt you wear. These seem trivial, but to your neural pathways, they are practice reps. You are training the muscle of commitment. When you look at a menu and you feel that familiar pull of hesitation, you must catch it. You must recognize that your brain is trying to maximize the outcome of a sandwich. It is absurd, but it is real. In that moment, you practice the art of satisfactory choice. You pick an option within 10 seconds, not because it is the best option, but because the act of choosing is more important than the outcome of the meal. You are teaching yourself a new rule. The rule is that a decision made is better than a decision delayed. Even if the sandwich is terrible, you have won. You have won because you exercised your will. You made a choice, and the world did not end. You survived the disappointment of a bad lunch. This is how you accumulate data points. As you practice this, you will encounter the fear of being wrong. This is the barrier we discussed earlier. We feel that a wrong decision leaves a permanent stain on our lives. We view decisions as concrete blocks that once placed cannot be moved, but this is rarely true. Rebuilding trust requires you to embrace the concept of the course correction. Very few decisions in life are irreversible. If you take a job and it is a disaster, you can quit. If you move to a new city and hate it, you can move back. If you end a relationship and realize it was a mistake, you can try to repair it, or you can learn from it. When you view a decision as a final verdict, the pressure is unbearable. When you view a decision as an experiment, the pressure lifts. An experiment cannot fail. It can only provide data. If the outcome is good, you keep doing it. If the outcome is bad, you have learned what does not work. This shift in perspective allows you to detach your self-worth from the result. You are not your decisions. You are the person experiencing the decisions. If you make a choice that leads to a difficulty, it does not mean you are foolish. It means you are in the arena. You are active. You are steering the ship. Consider the physics of steering. You cannot steer a parked car. You can turn the wheel as much as you want, but the car will not change direction. It must be moving to be guided. This is true for your life. As long as you are frozen in analysis, you are parked. You cannot adjust your course. You cannot find the better path because you are not on any path at all. By making a decision, any decision, you get the car moving. Once you are moving, you can see the landscape change. You can see that the road bends to the left. You can see obstacles you could not see from the starting line. You can adjust. You can turn. You can pivot. Trusting yourself does not mean knowing exactly where you are going. It means knowing that you can handle the steering wheel, whatever comes your way. This brings us to the voice in your head. For years, that voice has been a critic. It points out every flaw and every potential disaster. To rebuild trust, you must transform that voice into a coach. A critic points out what is wrong. A coach points out what is possible. When you make a choice and it does not go perfectly, the critic says, "Look what you did, you ruined it." The coach says, "Okay, that was rough, but now we know. What is the next move?" You must actively practice this internal dialogue. You must forgive yourself for the lack of omniscience. You are human. You cannot see the future. Expecting yourself to make the perfect choice every time is a form of cruelty. Stop demanding perfection from yourself. Demand progress instead. Demand movement. Every time you make a decision and stand by it, you put a deposit in the bank of self-trust. You are telling yourself that you are the captain of this vessel. There is a profound freedom that comes when you realize you can handle the consequences of being wrong. The fear of decision paralysis is really the fear that you are too weak to cope with a bad outcome. But you are not weak. You have navigated difficulty before. You have survived every bad day you have ever had. When you trust yourself, it does not mean you believe you will always be right. It means you believe you will be okay, even when you are wrong. It is the belief that you are resilient. It is the belief that you are adaptable. So, we start today. Not with the life-altering choice that has been keeping you awake at night. We start with the small things. We speed up the tempo. We stop checking reviews for an hour before buying a toothbrush. We stop asking 5 people for advice on what to wear. We reclaim the authority to govern our own lives in small increments. As you do this, the fog will begin to lift. The mental fatigue will lessen because you're no longer carrying the heavy load of 1,000 unmade choices. You will feel a lightness return to your chest. You will remember what it feels like to have momentum. This is the pathway back to yourself. It is paved with imperfect actions. It is paved with mistakes that taught you lessons. It is paved with the realization that the only wrong decision is the one you never make. You are rebuilding the engine while you drive the car, and that is the only way it has ever been done. Now that we understand how to rebuild the foundation of trust, we must look at the final hurdle. We must look at how to step fully into the light of action without the shadow of fear constantly chasing us. We need to learn how to choose with a clear mind and a steady hand. Choosing without fear. We have arrived at the final threshold. You have explored the roots of your paralysis and understood the biological and psychological mechanisms keeping you stuck. You have begun the work of rebuilding trust in your own judgment. Now comes the moment of application. This is where we discuss the art of choosing without fear. It is important to clarify what we mean when we say without fear. This does not mean the absence of adrenaline or the total silence of that warning voice in the back of your head. That voice is a biological constant. Choosing without fear means choosing without being ruled by fear. It means moving forward while the fear is still there, acknowledging its presence, but denying it the power to steer the ship. The greatest barrier to making a choice is the belief that you must have certainty before you act. You want to guarantee that the path you pick is the correct one. You want to see the destination before you take the first step. But this demand for certainty is a trap. The future is an unwritten country. No amount of analysis, No amount of sleepless nights and no amount of pro and con lists can predict the complexity of reality with 100% accuracy. When you wait for certainty, you are waiting for the impossible. The antidote to this paralysis is a fundamental shift in how you view the timeline of clarity. Most people believe that clarity leads to action. Or they think that once they understand everything, they will finally move. The psychological truth is exactly the opposite. Action leads to clarity. You cannot think your way into a new way of living. You have to live your way into a new way of thinking. Imagine you are standing in a dense fog. You can only see 3 feet in front of you. If you refuse to move until you can see the horizon, you will stand there forever. But if you take 1 step, the fog shifts. You can see 3 feet further. You take another step and you see a little more. The data you need to make the right decision can only be found by making a decision. You must enter the arena to see how the game is played. This brings us to the fear of making the wrong choice. This is the spectre that haunts the perfectionist. We look at decisions as pass or fail tests. We imagine that if we choose the wrong career, the wrong partner, or the wrong city, we have ruined our lives permanently. We treat life like a minefield where one wrong step spells disaster. We need to replace this catastrophic thinking with the concept of agility. Very few decisions in life are permanent. Very few doors lock behind you the moment you walk through them. If you make a choice and it turns out to be less than ideal, you retain the ability to choose again. You can pivot, you can adjust, you can leave. The human mind is incredibly adaptive, but it forgets this resilience when it is frozen in fear. You are not a statue cemented to the ground. You are a living, moving entity, capable of course, correction. When you understand that you can handle a wrong decision, the pressure evaporates, the stakes are lowered. You realize that you are not deciding your entire destiny in a single afternoon. You are simply deciding what you're going to do next. A powerful method to break the loop is to embrace the philosophy of experimentation. Scientists do not view an experiment that yields unexpected results as a failure. They view it as data. It tells them what does not work, which brings them closer to what does. Treat your life as a laboratory. If you are torn between 2 choices, stop asking which one is perfect. Ask which one offers the most potential for growth or learning. Ask which one makes you feel more expansive rather than contracted. Then try it. If it works, you have succeeded. If it does not work, you have learned. In both scenarios, you have gained something valuable. You have gained movement. Consider the alternative. Consider the person who never chooses because they are terrified of regret. They stay in the job they hate because they fear the new job might be hard. They stay in the relationship that has run its course because they fear being alone. They never paint the picture, write the book, or start the business because they are afraid it might not be a masterpiece. Years pass. The pain of the wrong decision is sharp, but it heals. The pain of indecision is dull, heavy, and endless. It is a slow erosion of the soul. Regret is not caused by doing the wrong thing. The deepest, most haunting regrets come from doing nothing at all. They come from the ghost of the life you never let yourself live. To choose without fear is to accept that there is no perfect path. There are only paths. One path may be rocky, and another may be smooth, but both will lead you somewhere. The only path that leads nowhere is the one you stand on while refusing to walk. You must also learn to trust your future self. Overthinking is often a lack of faith in your own ability to handle challenges. You worry that if things go wrong, you will collapse. But look at your history. You have navigated difficulties before. You have survived confusion before. If you make a choice today and it brings a new set of problems tomorrow, trust that the future version of you will have the wisdom and strength to solve them. You do not need to solve tomorrow's problems today. You only need to open the door. So how do you physically break the paralysis in the moment? You shrink the decision down. Do not focus on the outcome 5 years from now. Focus on the immediate action. What is the smallest possible step you can take? If you cannot decide to move to a new city, decide to visit for a weekend. If you cannot decide to change careers, decide to take 1 class. Motion breaks tension. Once you are in motion, The heavy weight of analysis paralysis falls away, replaced by the momentum of doing. As you begin to practice this, you will notice a change in your physiology. The anxiety that accumulates in your chest when you are stuck begins to dissipate. It is replaced by a sense of agency. Even if the water is choppy, it feels better to be steering the boat than to be drifting helplessly. Ultimately, we must redefine what success means in the context of decision-making. Success is not always getting the result you wanted. Success is the act of deciding itself. It is the assertion of your will upon the world. It is the declaration that you are an active participant in your own life, not a passive observer. Every time you make a choice, no matter how small, you are training your brain. You are reinforcing the neural pathways of confidence. You are teaching your nervous system that it is safe to act. You are building a habit of decisiveness that will compound over time. The first decision is the hardest. The second is easier. Eventually, choosing becomes your natural state. You have the intelligence, you have the capability. The only thing missing was the permission to be imperfect. Grant yourself that permission now. Step forward into the fog. Trust that the ground will be there when you put your foot down. The paralysis ends the moment you decide that learning is more important than being right. It ends when you value your own progress more than your fear of judgment. It ends when you realize that life is not a test to be passed, but an experience to be lived. Take the step, make the call, sign the paper, go. The wrong decision can teach you something. No decision teaches you nothing. Redefining wrong decisions. We have arrived at the final and perhaps the most difficult barrier to break. It is the heavy, suffocating fear of getting it wrong. We have explored why you freeze, and we have looked at the hidden triggers from your past. We have acknowledged the weight of small things and the high cost of doing nothing. But even with all that insight, one stubborn obstacle often remains. It is the belief that a wrong decision is a catastrophe. You hesitate because you are treating your life like a tightrope walk. You believe that there is one narrow path to happiness and success. If you place your foot 1 inch to the left or 1 inch to the right, you fall. You imagine that a single misstep leads to ruin. This mental model is what keeps you paralyzed. If every choice is a life or death situation for your future, then of course you are terrified. Of course you need to analyze every variable until you are exhausted. The stakes feel impossibly high. But this perspective is an illusion. Life is not a tightrope. It is a vast open field. There are very few cliffs you can fall off that you cannot climb back up. We need to completely redefine what a wrong decision actually is. When you think of a wrong decision, you likely picture a dead end. You imagine taking a job that you end up hating. You imagine moving to a new city where you feel lonely. You imagine starting a project that fails. You view these outcomes as lost time or wasted effort. You see them as evidence that you are not capable or that you lack judgment. Let us look at this differently. A decision is not a final verdict on your worth. It is simply a data point. It is an experiment. When a scientist runs an experiment and the result is not what they expected, they do not call it a tragedy. They call it data. They have learned something about the nature of reality that they did not know before. They now know what does not work, which brings them one step closer to what does. Apply this to your life. Let us say you accept that job offer, and it turns out to be a toxic environment. You might label that a wrong decision. You might beat yourself up for not seeing the warning signs. You might feel you have set your career back. But look at what you gained. You learned specifically what kind of culture you cannot tolerate. You learned to identify red flags you were blind to before. You perhaps learned that you value autonomy more than salary, or stability more than excitement. That is not lost time. That is accelerated wisdom. You possess knowledge now that the version of you from 6 months ago did not have. You are sharper. You are clearer on your values. The discomfort you felt was the tuition you paid for that clarity. Now compare that to the alternative. Compare that to the person who stayed in a stagnant situation because they were afraid to move. They did not take the job. They did not face the toxicity. They stayed safe. But they also stayed ignorant. They still do not know what they truly value. They still do not know their own boundaries. They have protected themselves from discomfort, but they have also protected themselves from growth. This is the paradox of decision-making. We think we need clarity before we can act. We think we need to know the destination before we start the car. But psychological reality works the other way around. Clarity is the result of action. You cannot think your way into knowing what you want. You can only act your way there. You have to step into the arena and interact with the world to get feedback. When you are paralyzed, you are starved of feedback. You are trapped in a simulation inside your own head. In your mind, the potential failure is a monster. In reality, the failure is usually just a problem to be solved. We must also dismantle the myth of the permanent mistake. There are very few decisions in life that are irreversible. Jeff Bezos famously described this as the difference between one-way doors and two-way doors. A one-way door is a decision you cannot come back from. Those decisions deserve slow, careful deliberation. But most decisions in modern life are two-way doors. If you walk through and do not like what you see, you can turn around and walk back out. You can quit the job, you can move back to your hometown, you can apologize, you can change your major, you can pivot your business. When you realize that you can almost always correct course, the pressure begins to lift. You do not need to be perfect because you are adaptable. You are not a fragile statue that shatters when dropped. You are a living, breathing organism designed to adapt and recover. The fear of the wrong decision is also rooted in a lack of self-trust. You are afraid that if you make a mistake, you will not be able to handle the consequences. You worry you will be crushed by regret or embarrassment. But look at your history. You have made mistakes before. You have faced disappointments. You are still here. You navigated those moments. You found a way through. Trusting yourself does not mean trusting that you will always be right. It means trusting that you will be okay even when you are wrong. It means knowing that you have the resilience to handle a less than perfect outcome. When you build this kind of self-trust, the need for certainty vanishes. You become willing to wade into the unknown because you know you are a capable swimmer. There is another hidden cost to fearing the wrong decision. It makes us rigid. When we are obsessed with making the perfect choice, we hold on too tightly to our plans. If we choose a path and it starts to get rocky, we refuse to pivot because that would mean admitting we were wrong. Paradoxically, the people who are most afraid of making mistakes are often the ones who stay in them the longest. They are so invested in being right that they ignore the signals telling them to change course. On the other hand, when you view decisions as experiments, you become fluid. You try something. You watch the results. If it works, you do more of it. If it does not, you adjust. You are not attached to the decision itself. You are attached to the progress. This agility is a superpower in a complex world. The person who makes 10 decisions and gets 5 wrong will always lap the person who spends a year agonizing over one decision trying to get it perfect. So how do we break the loop? We start by lowering the bar. We stop trying to be prophets who can predict the future. We accept that we are fallible humans operating with limited information. We give ourselves permission to pivot. We stop asking, will this be perfect? And we start asking, is this reversible? We stop asking, what if I fail? And we start asking, what will I learn? You must realize that the feeling of uncertainty will never fully go away. The most successful and decisive people you admire feel it too. The difference is that they do not let it stop them. They understand that movement is life. Stagnation is decay. Even a stumble is a form of forward momentum. The next time you find yourself stuck at a crossroads, staring down 2 different paths, terrified of picking the loser, remember this. One path might be rocky. One path might be longer. One path might force you to turn back. But standing still at the intersection ensures you go nowhere. It ensures you learn nothing. It ensures you remain exactly as you are, frozen in time, while the world moves on without you. Release the need for the perfect narrative. Your life is not a movie script that needs to make sense in every scene. It is a messy, beautiful, chaotic process of discovery. Embrace the mess. Embrace the detours. They are often where the most important lessons are hidden. Ultimately, the logic is simple and undeniable. When you act, reality gives you an answer. When you wait, you only have silence. The silence of indecision is a vacuum where anxiety breeds. Action clears the air, so make the choice, take the step. If it is a misstep, you will adjust. If you fall, you will rise with new knowledge. Do not fear the error, fear the absence of living. The wrong decision can teach you something. No decision teaches you nothing. The final transformation. You have spent years believing that hesitation was keeping you safe. You waited for certainty before taking a step. You thought that if you analysed every angle, the perfect path would reveal itself. But we have learned that clarity is not a prerequisite for action. Clarity is the result of action. The final transformation occurs when you stop viewing decisions as a pass or fail test. You begin to see them as experiments. You are not changing into someone who never fails. You are changing into someone who refuses to stay stuck. The fear of regret loses its power when you realize that you can handle whatever comes next. You build self-trust by moving forward even when your hands are shaking. The paralysis dissolves the moment you choose progress over perfection. Do not let the fear of a mistake keep you frozen in place. Take the step, make the choice, embrace the unknown. The wrong decision can teach you something. No decision teaches you nothing.